For the past 4 years, Joe Biden, unelected bureaucrats, and anti-gun politicians on both sides of the aisle have waged war on gun owners and the Second Amendment. But last Friday, President Trump finally took action to end the war on guns by signing an executive order simply titled Protecting Second Amendment Rights. So what does President Trump's executive order on guns actually do? Hey guys, Ryan Flugar with the National Association for Gun Rights here. President Trump is earning a ton of praise for this, and we must say we're pretty encouraged too, but there's still much work to be done in order to see that this executive order actually results in the undoing of Biden's insane gun control overreaches. In a moment, I'm going to break it all down for you, what it says, what we think or hope will be the results, and what you can do to help. But first, go ahead and tap that subscribe button for me so we can keep you up to date on all of the latest developments with Trump's pro-gun executive action and everything that's going to happen in his second term. Oh, and by the way, there's a link in the description and pinned comments below that has the text of the executive order and a petition to Attorney General Pam Bondi encouraging her to carry it out in its entirety. So please sign that petition and share it. Okay, so President Trump hit the ground running with virtually every issue he laid out on the campaign trail. But up until last Friday, there wasn't much about undoing the 4-year-long assault on gun rights by Biden's ATF and the Justice Department. Understandably, everybody was starting to get a little restless, and judging by the comments y'all were leaving to us on YouTube and X, many of y'all were starting to get downright upset about it, and frankly, so was I. After all, we have yet to hear an announcement from the White House on who's going to be tapped for ATF director. Brandon Herrera, we're rooting for you. And the pick of Attorney General Pam Bondi, for all her many conservative accolades, doesn't exactly have an encouraging past on gun rights vis-a-vis red flag laws in Florida. On the other hand, one good thing Trump did do early on in this term was he shut down Biden's White House Office of Gun Violence. Believe me, we were all trying to read into the tea leaves of every little thing that did or did not come out of the White House in the last few weeks. Finally, at about 5:30 p.m. Eastern last Friday night, President Trump signed an executive order on gun rights. So what does it do? In general, this executive order does two things. First, it orders Attorney General Pam Bondi to conduct a full review within 30 days of everything that the Biden administration did that even could have infringed on our gun rights. Sort of like a gun control audit. We're talking policies, regulations, international agreements, everything from January of 2021 to right now. All that nonsense that former Attorney General Merrick Garland and disgraced ATF Director Stephen Dettelbach shoved down our throats. And we're not just talking about what happened at the DOJ and the ATF, but it actually covers all agencies. Secondly, it requires Attorney General Bondi to propose a plan to the president's domestic policy advisor to push back on all of these anti-gun infringements. Let me start by saying this is a solid first step, but it's only a first step. I can already hear some of you pounding on the keyboard in the comments section saying that the order did not actually do anything. On the other hand, the PR FUDs over at the NRA, they've already fawned all over this, virtually declaring this order to have single-handedly saved the Second Amendment. So what does this all mean? I'll try to take this step by step. So you're right, it doesn't change any specific policy right now, and maybe it should have. After all, you and I can list off the things that Biden did to us off the top of our heads, and if it can be done by executive order, you'd think it can be undone with the same swoop of a pen, right? Why do we need a review in the first place? Well, if you ask my non-lawyerly opinion, we don't. But I'm going to offer one possible take on why this approach might be necessary and how it could pan out for the best over the next few weeks. Many of the things that Biden did that hurt gun owners the worst were not actually done by executive order per se. They were done by a less formal but much more devious executive action. This is where Biden would direct the Justice Department or the ATF to go through a formal rulemaking process as prescribed by law under the Administrative Procedures Act. It's the kind of process where the ATF will apply or rework or revise its own often extremely biased interpretations of what Congress has previously passed. But it does so after soliciting 90 days of public comments and publishing their final ruling in the Federal Register. In recent years, Biden abused this process by going far beyond what Congress ever authorized by law on gun control. But Congress, in their infinite stupidity, kind of let it happen, either by delegating large chunks of power to federal agencies to fill in the blanks and refusing to exercise oversight when agencies like the ATF got it wrong, or by passing Dumb stuff like John Cornyn's bipartisan gun control bill of 2022, giving fig leaf cover for agencies to take brand new whacks at how they're going to implement new and existing anti-gun federal laws. By rewriting history, reinterpreting past laws, stretching the boundaries of new laws, and just completely making up science by how firearms work, Biden's ATF has entrenched a lot of bad policy and precedent into how federal firearms laws are enforced. It's like a parasite that's just wrapped around our spines, and now it's up to us to remove it. One thing an executive order cannot do is abolish a federal statute. Believe me, right now, I kind of wish it could. Now, the Supreme Court can and should abolish every federal unconstitutional gun control out there. And indeed, many courts have been ruling in favor of NAGR and others against the ATF for overstepping its authority in recent years. But short of another landmark gun rights decision from Justice Thomas and the majority of the Supreme Court, all the laws we hate are still on the books. The National Firearms Act of 1934, the Gun Control Act of 1968, all the way up to the fix nicks and the red flag nonsense passed by John Cornyn in the last decade. So it kind of makes sense that someone must actually comb through all of what Joe Biden's bureaucrats did in order to undo it all without accidentally leaving some of it intact to grow and to fester. For some things, it very well might be that President Trump can and may ultimately eliminate them with the stroke of a pen. For others, it might actually take a whole rule process to undo one of these previous rule processes. Sounds kind of silly, I know. And frankly, for other things, we might actually need to get President Trump and his Solicitor General, the person who argues for the government's position in court, to just surrender. This is somewhat of a similar approach to Brandon Herrera's recent provocative video where he lays out a plan to systemically dismantle the ATF by first using the agency to reset pro-gun precedent and then shutting down the whole darn thing for good. I will link to that video in the description. Now, when it comes to undoing all of Biden's anti-gun ATF executive actions, I know I would trust someone like Brandon Herrera to get it done. But the $1.7 billion question today is, can we trust Attorney General Pam Bondi to fully execute Trump's pro-gun executive order? Can we trust her to do a complete review of everything Biden did to infringe on the Second Amendment over the last 4 years, and to leave no stone unturned, and to implement a plan of action to undo it all without leaving a single one of these things intact? I don't know. I honestly don't know. And anybody who sits here and claims that they do know what Attorney General Bondi is going to do, they don't. There's just too much history of gun owners being taken for granted to assume that it'll get done right. There's too much ambiguity in the order to know for sure what will be included in Bondi's final review. But there's also every reason to be optimistic right now. Every reason to be optimistic that much good can come of this review and the actions to follow. We could be just as easily a few short weeks away from Donald Trump and Doge nuking a ton of bad gun control. That's good. That's a good spot to be in right now. Remember, the text of Trump's order does give AG Bondi a deadline. Bondi has until Monday, March 9th, to complete her review of Biden-era gun controls. And she, at minimum, it says, at minimum, must specifically review 7 categories. And I'm going to list all 7 of those categories for you right now and what we think they must include. The first category is all presidential agencies and actions that may have impinged on the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens. This sounds like a catch-all for anything Biden did to attack our Second Amendment rights. This is the no stone unturned category. This should include investigating the ATF for how they assembled an illegal gun registry containing nearly 1 billion records. The second category is rules promulgated by the Justice Department, including by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives pertaining to firearms and or federal firearms licensees. This deals with the rulemaking process that I talked about earlier. Rules that came out of the ATF that need to be axed include the 2022 frame or receiver rule banning personally assembled firearms without government registration. Also, the 2023 stabilizing brace rule banning scores of previously lawful pistols, which courts have actually struck this rule down, by the way. And of course, the engaged in business rule, which is really just a backdoor way to impose universal gun registration against the wishes of Congress and the Constitution. Let's get rid of these made-up rules. The third category for review is enhanced regulatory enforcement policy pertaining to firearms and or federal firearms licensees. This is Biden's 2021 zero-tolerance policy on gun dealers. It was a scheme. It made it so that under his administration, even the tiniest clerical errors could get a gun shop license revoked. It was never about stopping crime. It was always about making it harder for regular Americans to buy firearms. Trump's review here could mean a fairer enforcement system where honest gun businesses aren't punished over paperwork mistakes. The fourth category for review is reports and related documents issued by the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. Talked about that earlier. In its short year and a half of existence, and it's now gone, this gun control office was well on its way to cranking out more gun control executive actions for Biden, producing state model legislation, gun control legislation, and spending taxpayer dollars on gun control advocacy. Good riddance. Get rid of everything they touch. Let's figure out what they touched and get rid of it. The fifth category for review is the positions taken by the United States in any and all ongoing potential Second Amendment litigation. Yes, we need Bondi not only to review the government's position in ongoing court cases, but to also change those positions. No more briefs arguing for the gun control position in court. Withdraw them. File new ones arguing for the right to bear arms and against the blue state attorneys general that are trying to do harm in our nation's legal system. The DOJ can start by taking pro-gun positions in cases like the United States versus Brown, which challenges NFA regulations, and by honoring recent pro-gun court rulings, like one that came out last week in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, declaring the 18 to 21-year-old gun ban unconstitutional. The sixth category for review is agencies' classifications of firearms and ammunition. Yes, we need to undo arbitrary classifications of firearms with respect to the NFA that make no sense at all. We need to undo attempts to ban certain types of ammo, like Biden's war on lead ammo, which is really just designed to make ammunition scarce and unaffordable. And we need to stop the arbitrary interpretation of the so-called sporting purpose clause, enabling subjective import bans on scores of firearms that are legal to possess. The final category for review is the processing of applications to make, manufacture, transfer, or export firearms. A right delayed is a right denied, and it's time to end the deliberate delays of processing NFA items and NICS checks. Yeah, they shouldn't exist to begin with, but these processes should not be weaponized against law-abiding Americans just trying to exercise their Second Amendment rights. Now, the good news is these 7 categories covered in Trump's executive order are pretty broad, giving Attorney General Bondi maximum flexibility to review everything that's even remotely gun-related. But it must include everything. For example, it absolutely should include our case against the ATF over forced reset triggers. That case is currently awaiting a ruling in the Fifth Circuit. The government didn't give it a rulemaking process. They just banned these triggers with a made-up wave of the magic wand, faking science, and inventing new law. This is the kind of stuff that could easily be overlooked in this review, but it's also the kind of case that has real-world repercussions. Take, for example, President of Rotary Triggers, Lawrence DeMonico. He's bravely fought alongside us for almost 2 years. 2 years of getting his bank account assets frozen, being targeted by the ATF for raids and whatnot, and having his life and livelihood thrown under a microscope. This is the kind of life-destroying nonsense that must stop. We've just seen too much of it against honest and law-abiding folks in the gun industry and against ordinary people trying to lawfully buy and sell firearms. We also must ensure that as part of this executive order review process, Attorney General Bondi makes the correct pro-gun recommendation for each of these items. Believe me, the last thing we need is for another Jeff Sessions or Bill Barr-style blunder that opens the floodgates to Republican-backed gun controls like red flag gun confiscation. We already saw that movie once, and we didn't like how it ended. But together, you and I have a say in how part 2 of this movie ends. You can get involved right now by signing your petition to Attorney General Pam Bondi, urging her to follow Trump's executive order to the letter and to strike down all of Biden's anti-gun schemes. Go ahead and click that link and sign right now. Now, of course, your National Association for Gun Rights will continue doing everything we can in the legislative branch and the judicial branch to complement an honest effort here to implement this pro-gun executive order in the executive branch. From continuing our half-dozen federal lawsuits against the ATF and state gun bans to working with congressmen like Thomas Massie to pass real constitutional carry and to push bills to abolish the ATF and to undo Biden-era gun controls using the power of congressional oversight. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. This is just the first step. But at least for now, this executive order is a step to undoing years of anti-gun policies from the Biden administration. It's about making sure we can keep and bear arms without the government constantly moving the goalposts. And that could be a huge win here. Remember, our rights aren't given, they're fought for. So thanks for tuning in, and as always, stay armed, stay safe, stay free.